Right on, bass fans. We're back at it again. Good episode last week on the Carolina rig. This week, we progress on to our first hard bait. Lipless crankbait, rattle trap, rattling bait, whatever you want to call them. I've chosen to start with this one because this one can be easier to learn how to fish with not very much instruction. So the only disadvantage when we start getting into the baits with the treble hooks is that parents, if you're teaching your kids how to fish, you just need to be a little bit more circumspect, a little bit more careful. I'm not saying that you can't stick a single hook in your hand. You absolutely can. I've done it hundreds of times. It's one of those things. With the treble hook baits, you've got 6 or 9 chances to do it. So you've got to be a little bit more careful. Parents, with your kids or your children, just be a little bit more observant, especially on the backswing. The front swing, they're usually facing the water when they're firing it out, but on the backswing, just watch behind them for friends, family, bushes, dogs, whatever. And that's when you're on the land or on the boat, particularly on the boat where you're in confined quarters. I don't know what it is about lipless baits, but they seem to stick a lot easier than most other baits. I have pulled several out of myself and several out of friends, a couple out of my dad when he was still alive. So be careful. We're going to get into all the particulars shortly. What we're going to talk about first is tackle and setup for it. A little bit of background with lipless crankbaits, as far as we'll get into where you fish them in detail a little bit later on in the video. But for now, they're most effective around some form of vegetation. I'm not saying you won't catch them anywhere else. In fact, I've got a couple of ideas for you where to try them to do other things, but they're most effective around vegetation. So as far as rods go, our 7-foot medium heavy rod that we discussed several episodes ago, whether spinning or casting, is for that type of thing is going to be just fine, because what eventually ends up happening is you'll be bringing it around or close or over some type of vegetation, submerged or otherwise. You'll get one of the hooks stuck in it, pop it free, and the fish will eat it. So you do need a bit of tip in the rod. However, and this is going to be one of those categories where you might want to consider a different type of rod, because the rod that I'm going to suggest to you today, you could use for other type of crankbait fishing as well. So here we go. This is one of those lures where you want to bomb cast it. You want to get it out as far as you can so that you can have a nice long retrieve. Once you find out what part of the water column the fish are in, you want to keep it in the strike zone for as long as possible. So the longer your cast is, the more effective you're going to be able to fishing. In the previous video, we spoke about fan casting. That's something that you do a lot with lipless crankbaits. It's a search bait. A lot of other baits that we're going to come to are be more specifically dialed in as that is supposed to be a. Lipless crankbaits, in my opinion, are supposed to represent small bait fish, or in some cases a crawfish, but 99.9% of the time, it's supposed to be a small bait fish. And that holds true when you start looking at a lot of the colors that are available for you to buy. You need a rod that's got a little bit more length and some give in the tip and some backbone. If they bury their heads into that vegetation or whatever the case might be, what you're fishing around, you need to be able to get them out. I recommend a rod between 7 and 7.5 feet. It's up to you as the angler where you're comfortable with that rod. I like a 7'6", 7.5 foot rod. When I'm fishing around vegetation, I like a medium heavy rod with some give to it. So a medium heavy moderate. And if you go, most websites that you go onto or tackle shops that you go into, you will find a 7'6" medium heavy moderate rod. There's a bunch of different sizes of lipless crankbaits that you can buy. But with that type of rod, you can pretty much throw all of them. Now, as far as the reel goes, the spinning reel, we've spoken about it, 5.5, that's the best you're going to get. You'll just have to wind a little bit quicker. This is a bait that likes to move fast most of the year. There are some techniques we'll talk about when you need to slow it down. So 7.2 to 1 to 7.6 to 1, you should be just fine. Line, you can absolutely throw a lipless crankbait on braid, especially if you're fishing around thicker vegetation. It's probably better to throw it on braid. But most of the time, you will get away with, for general fishing, 12 to 15 pound fluorocarbon is going to be just fine. And if you get around the thick stuff, then go onto the braid with a short fluorocarbon leader. With a spinning rod, 20 to 30 pound braid, and then let's just say a 15 to 20 pound fluorocarbon leader, depending on how thick the structure is or the cover is that you're going to get around. This is a bait that has been kind of pigeonholed as it's only for one thing. And what I'm hoping to show you today is you can use it for way more than that. It's a good bait to learn on because it's essentially a chuck and wind bait. You don't have to work the bait. There are situations that we will talk about where you do need to work the bait a little bit, but you will catch fish on a lipless crankbait on a straight wind. It's the way it is. It is that effective as a bait. I have caught fish on lipless crankbaits pretty much everywhere I've fished. There's certain times of the year when it's more effective than other times of the year. But I usually, if I'm going to a lake that I don't know, I will usually have a couple of lipless crankbaits in my box. It's the way it is. Okay, bass fans. Let's get into what makes a lipless crankbait a lipless crankbait. One of the advantages of painting your own baits is you get to have the ones that are unpainted. So I can show you exactly what's going on inside here. So most lipless crankbaits have got a wedge shape to them. The head is a wedge shape. And that's pretty much so that it can catch the water and make noise. You can see here that the majority of lipless crankbaits have weight in the head. And that's to make it swim like that, in a downward position, like that. The line tie is there, so when it pulls it with this flat surface here, that's what causes the bait to rattle. Obviously lots of different sizes and shapes of them. This particular one is a 3/4 ounce one. This one here has got multiple BBs, but you can see that the BBs inside are bigger. So it gives kind of a lower sound when it vibrates, as opposed to this one, which has got the tiny BBs in. It's more of a high-pitched sound. Some of the lipless crankbaits that you get are called one knockers, and they only have one tungsten bearing or one large BB inside them, which give them, the best way to describe it is a thump. So it's like a thump, 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 thump sound, as opposed to that sound which you hear. As I said earlier, the plan behind lipless crankbaits is that they are meant to look like small bait fish, in my opinion. So a lot of the patterns, not all, a lot of the patterns that you're going to find look like some or other type of bait fish. So that one you can see has actually got foil on the inside of it so that it flashes, and then some blood on the belly of it, big eyes, back fin. The original lipless crankbait, as far as I know, I've done a little bit of research, I'm not an expert, was either the rattle trap or the rattling spot. The rattle trap was made by Bill Lewis, and the rattling spot was made by, I can't remember. Cannot remember. So the the original bull, this is the one that had the fin on the back of it like that. You can see there again another type of baitfish pattern, chrome, orange on the belly, green on the green scales on the back of it. This is a bit more subtle, this one. This is an Ema Rock and Vibe. This one is actually see-through. I don't know if that'll come up on the camera, but see-through. You can actually see the little ball bearings through the paint. It's a beautiful little bait. Then you can see, if you compare it to something like that, this is a 3/8 ounce. This has got heavier weights in it, but it's quite a bit smaller than this 3/4 ounce. And this 3/4 ounce is a copy of a Spro Aruka Shad. Here is a Spro Aruka Shad in Spooky Shad color. This is my favorite color in the Spro baits. Very pretty baits, loud bait. Beautiful paint on that. Spro does a really good job with their paint. So you can see a lot of them have got the reflective properties. This one is a Excalibur, now a Boya, with the gold belly and black back. That's a very popular color. There's another chrome one. This is a Rapala. Nice big eyes on this bait. Lovely shape to it as well. Looks just like a small bait fish when it's coming through the water. This is a great bait as well. And then a color that, if you don't know what color to buy and you're unfamiliar with the lake that you're going to, but a color that pretty much works everywhere you can throw it, you can see this one's a bit wrecked, is chrome with a blue back. If you said to me you're only allowed one color of lipless crankbait, that's probably the color that I would buy. It works everywhere. I don't know why, it just does. So, on a previous video when we discussed tools, we talked about the split ring pliers. And I just happened to find one of my baits this morning that needed a new hook. So I'm going to show you how the split ring pliers work before we dive into the rest. So there's the split ring pliers, and there's a split ring. Let's see if it picks it up. Catch the split ring, you can see that it opens it up. Put it onto the hook hanger of the lure. And guys, this is just the way I do it. Pop it through. And then I give it a little small turn. Take my treble hook, put the eye of my treble hook over the split ring like that, hold it with my thumb, and then just turn the split ring. And that's how the split ring pliers work. Something that you might want to consider if you find a lipless crankbait that works for you is to get it in a couple of different sizes. So this is a Rapala. I had a lot. These are new, well, new-ish ones. This one, the hook was just damaged. That's why I've replaced it. The other one I didn't want to put on video because it is so wrecked. It's actually not even funny, and you wouldn't be able to recognize the paint. But this is a Rapala bait that I have done very well with in the past. It's chrome blackback, and it's got some little ghost scales on it. And I liked it so much that I bought the smaller one. So what size do lipless crankbaits come in? They come in many sizes, usually from 1/4 ounce up to 1 ounce. If I had to say middle ground, go for the 3/8 ounce bait. That bait you're pretty much going to be able to use anywhere you go. We touched on the different types of structure a little bit earlier. But let's get into a little bit more detail as to where you can fish a lipless crankbait. In my opinion, it's one of those baits you can pretty much fish anywhere. I don't think that there are any hard and fast rules. We're going to go to the map just now and point a few things out on the map to you. But as long as it's not in heavy timber or bushes or stuff like that, I think you're pretty much good to go. Obviously, you've got to be a little bit careful with it and a little bit smart. Don't be throwing it in the middle of thick grass and things like that. But certainly in scattered grass, you want to be throwing it around the grass. You want it to hang up on loose strands or the outside strands of the grass where you just pop it free. And the fish will see that as a little bait fish trying to escape and come up and snack it. And when we spoke about the rod types earlier, the one thing that I want to tell you about lipless crankbaits, when bass eat these, it's generally not a subtle bite. When they eat them, they eat them. And the reason why I suggested you wanted to go with a more moderate rod, a rod that's got some give to it, is what they normally do is they'll come and take the bait and they'll turn their head away and they'll start swimming straight away. They hit it at 100 miles an hour. And the problem with that sometimes is that your immediate reaction is you want to set the hook, and with a stiffer rod you could actually take the lure away from the fish. Or if it hits it that hard, it can sometimes tear itself off the hook. So with that more moderate rod, the rod will bend and allow the fish to turn with the bait and allow you time to put a gentle set into it and to start winding it in. Right, let's go to a map and have a look at some spots on a map where good starting spots for a lipless crankbait. So here's our generic map, which we are going to try to use for most of this series so that there's continuity. Lipless crankbaits are at their best in shallower water. So we are going to say, for the majority of the time, water that is shallower than 15 feet. They are not diving baits. You cannot get them to dive. Like we mentioned earlier, if you want to do that kind of thing, you've got to count them down. So that kind of narrows down the area where you want to throw them. I like to throw them around vegetation, like I mentioned earlier, and we are going to say that on this map, anywhere where there is green, there will be some sort of vegetation. Any areas where you've got deeper water that shelves up to shallower water, like you can see here, the shallower water here is indicated with varying degrees of light blue. So here we have, for example, we have 9 foot going all the way up to 3 foot. So you get a good long bomb cast in there right up to the shallows, and you can work it right down over this high point here. You can see the other water around it is fairly deep, but this high point here is all shallow. That's this blue area here. And then you can definitely fish them around docks. They are not as easy to fish around docks. My suggested technique for fishing lipless crankbaits around docks would be to stay a long, good cast away from them and then get as close parallel to the sides of the docks or across the front of the dock if the docks aren't too deep, and retrieve right down the sides of the docks like that. Obviously there's some risk there of getting it stuck, but if you are prepared to take the risk, I think it's definitely worth a shot. Other good areas to try a lipless crankbait would be over a submerged roadbed. Ignore the depth there, guys. Let's just say that this was a shallow roadbed or a ditch close to shallow water. Be a great area to try a lipless crankbait. Shallow roadbeds and ditches and submerged creeks are going to feature a lot in what we have to talk about of all techniques of fishing, primarily because they usually hold fish at some time of the year. So, what about around timber? Yes, absolutely. If you have timber that is submerged or it's trees that are sticking out of the water, absolutely, as long as it's not too thick. I wouldn't go throwing into the middle of a bunch of trees, but definitely if you see loose trees or trees that might be slightly further apart, work it around the timber. A lipless crankbait is, although it's designed to look like a small bait fish possibly, it is still a reaction bait. It will call fish in from a long way. So, for example, like if you are fishing for smallmouth bass and you were over a big flat with some boulders on it with super clear water, even if it was 3 foot deep, it will call fish from a long way away to come and investigate what the noise is and the vibration is in the water. So again, other than super thick vegetation and thick bushes and thick trees, you can pretty much fish that guy anywhere that you want to. It's It's entirely up to you. And whilst we're on that subject, let's talk about some retrieves. A couple of things I want to discuss here. I've got some different ideas on it, but let's talk about a couple of retrieves. If you get around scattered vegetation that maybe hasn't broken the surface, eelgrass, emergent vegetation that's still growing. It sounds strange to say this, but you actually want to target or get as close to that vegetation as possible. So what you would do is you would pick a line where your lure is going to either just clip the edge of the vegetation, come over the top of the vegetation if it's deep enough, or even snag if there's a little point coming off that vegetation that's not too thick. Snag that vegetation so you can pop the lure out of it. One of the most effective retrieves I've found with fishing a lipless crankbait, if you're not around vegetation, is to cast out, wind, sweep the rod, wind up the slack, sweep the rod, wind up the slack. You can vary your retrieve speed, and this is something that you're going to hear me say quite a lot going through all these techniques. The fish will tell you how fast or slow that they want it. So if you are winding just a general medium wind like that and you're not getting bit, speed it up a little bit. And speed up your, maybe pop it a bit more than sweep. Just pop, pop. Sometimes, particularly in the early spring and then in the late fall again, they want it moving a little bit faster. Another technique that you can use is to yo-yo. So what that means is, if you're fishing in deeper water, but you still want to fish with a lipless crankbait, you can cast it out, let it go down. Particularly when the bottom is clear of obstructions, if it's a shale bottom or a clay bottom, even a rocky bottom, if it's not too jagged, let it go down, let it hit the bottom, take up the slack, long sweep with the rod, wind up the slack, slowly let it go down. Long sweep with the rod, wind up the slack, let it go down. In between, you can give it, when you're coming up on the slack, you can give it a couple of pop, pop like that. Down again. Long sweep with the rod, let it. It's called yo-yoing. So what the lure is doing is, it's actually doing this. And then a technique which I haven't perfected it, but something that I've been trying. If you have a lipless crankbait of some sort that is your favorite bait, if you find that you have success on that, if you've got a couple of lakes and you catch fish on that bait in the lakes that you've been to, what I like to do is, and you can do this right at the ramp, or if you're a bank fisherman, where there's some clear water, where there's a bit of a drop off. So if you went and stood on a jetty, say, and you take that favorite bait of yours, hold the rod vertical out in front of you like this, and either flick the bail arm of the spinning reel or push the button on the bait casting reel and let the bait go down to the bottom whilst timing it with your watch, or just count 1001, 1002. When the bait hits the bottom and you know the relative depth of that water, let's say it's 6 foot and it hit the bottom in 6 seconds, it's falling at a foot a second. This is a better technique to do off the boat, admittedly, because you will have some kind of sonar to help you. And you're going along on your boat and you stop at a particular spot and you see the fish are 3 feet off the bottom and it's 10 feet deep. Make a good long cast and you count it down. It's called counting down. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005, 1006, 1007. And start winding. Lipless crankbaits, if you keep your rod fairly parallel to the surface of the water, lipless crankbaits are one of those baits that they will only start to rise when you get right to the end of the retrieve. So what that does is it allows you to keep a bait running at 7 foot. The fish are 3 feet off the bottom. We're in 10 feet of water. So that bait is running at 7 foot in the water column almost the whole way back to the boat. So what that does is it increases your chance of getting a bite. I'm still teaching myself how to do it, but it works. I've done it and it works. Proof of concept, it works. Something for you guys to think about and something to try. Another very good technique to do in areas where there's not a lot of vegetation, say if you've got a bluff bank or a riprap bank or a dam wall or something like that, is to burn a lipless crankbait. You need to use a heavier one when you do this technique because you don't want it rising up in the water column when you're burning it. Burning means to wind it very quickly. And what often happens when you get against hard structure like that, or hard cover in the case of a riprap bank or a dam wall, when you get against hard structures like that, what sometimes happens, depending on the prevailing wind directions, is it can push the bait up against those hard structure and they've got nowhere to go. And you'll actually see that on your sonar if you're on a boat and you're going down the bank. From the bank, you may even be able to see them with the naked eye. And what you can do is you can fire the lipless out there and you actually wind it through the schools of bait. And I'll explain to you colors a little bit later. And you wind it through the schools of bait. But what you do is you burn it, slow it down, 1, 2, 3, burn it, slow it down, 1, 2, 3, and actually burn it through that bait. And when you get to the bait, just kill it and let it sort of do its thing on the way down, and then hop it up and start burning it, kill it, so it looks like a fish that's injured. You can get very good results that way as well. Okay, we've said that the lipless crankbait is a lot of the time is a reaction type bait. So what does the bite feel like? What does it feel like when a fish loads up on a lipless crankbait? Honestly, guys, there's not going to be a lot of times when there can be any question that it was a bite. Usually, and there are times when you'll get a fish will just come up and slurp it and swim off with it. But the majority of the time when you're fishing a lipless crankbait, there's no mistake. You will know that it's a bite. It's savage. It's beautiful. It wants to rip the rod out of your hands. It is a very positive bite. Let's put it that way. There's a couple of things that we can do to make it a little bit more interesting. One of the things, I think this has been done commercially, I'm not 100% sure. Look at the state of that little bluegill pattern. It has been annihilated. One of the things that I like to do is to take the back hook off. And this is a particularly good thing, effective thing to do when you're yo-yoing a bait, that we spoke about that retrieve just now. Yo-yo the bait, because when you on the upswing of the yo-yo, this little blade spins, and as it's falling, this little blade spins. So what you need to do is you get a small ball bearing swivel, preferably, doesn't have to be, but preferably, and a tiny little blade. That is a number 1.5 willow leaf blade. I would not go any bigger than a number 2 blade. If you went up to a bigger lipless crankbait like this one, you could probably go slightly bigger, but I think if you go any bigger than that, what it'll do is it'll throw off the vibration of the bait. Another little tip or trick that we could do here is to change out the belly hook for a slightly bigger hook if you compare it to the tail hook. So this is a number 4 and that is a number 6. And again, it depends on the size of the bait that you're throwing. So that is a 3/4 ounce bait. That is a 3/8 ounce bait. Both with number 4s and number 6s. But you can imagine yourself when you go down to a little mini bait like that, it's not going to work. Those are number 10s on there. Because the lipless crankbait rides, generally speaking, in a head down position like that, the chances are that these bottom hooks are not going to get as hung up as if the bait was riding in a horizontal position like that. Colors, guys, baitfish colors it's the way it's going to be. If I had to suggest several colors which it might be nice to have in your box and to try, get some kind of a subtle color like this one. If you're in really clear water, that would pretty much mimic any type of tiny little baitfish. White belly, some other color on the side, green brown on the top, big eyes, and a bit of shine to it. This has got like a holographic finish underneath it. That's going to do it for a holographic bait. It'll work anywhere, this color. Some type of a chrome bait, whether it be silver or gold, and that's pretty much going to have you covered. However, there are certain times of the year, usually very early in the spring when the water is still cold, and sometimes late in the fall, where a crawl pattern can come into play. This is one of my baits that I've painted. This is just like a red crawl pattern, orange belly, red on the sides. Little bit of a shell pattern going on, dark back, dark brown back, dark eyes. And then I just like to always put a little something extra, a little bit of yellow on the tail. But the crawl pattern, particularly in the early spring, can be lethal. Absolutely lethal. I do not know why this is. I haven't had anybody explain it to me sufficiently so I can actually believe them. But it works. So if something works, we have to try it. It's the way it is. Those are the rules, guys. If that's a color that works, you should probably have one in your tackle box. Like I said earlier, a 3/8 ounce bait is probably going to get it done everywhere that you go. However, if there are a lot of small bait fish in the lake or the river that you fish in, I am not opposed to throwing a small lipless crankbait. They are a little bit more difficult, not a lot, a little bit more difficult to throw. If you're going to go all the way down to that size of one, you're probably going to end up throwing it on a spinning rod. That is a tiny little guy. This is a 1/4 ounce Rapala lipless crankbait. I can't remember the name. Let's see if we can see it there. We've got the old a ripping wrap. There we go. A 1/4 ounce ripping wrap. I think this is an 1/8 ounce bait. It's a tiny little bait. But sometimes post spawn, when there's fry in the water, you know, I'm just putting it out there, guys. Have a little think about it. Tiny little bait that it is. So that's a 1/4 ounce bait. There's another 1/4 ounce bait just for comparison. Both of those are Rapalas. I think that's a ripping wrap and this is a rattling wrap. My favorite all-round size, as we've discussed, is a 3/8 ounce bait. It's important that you look on the packaging of the bait, because some companies don't put as much shot BBs in them as other companies, so a bait that size could well be a 1/4 ounce. So just look on the packaging of the bait to see what size bait is in the packaging. We spoke a little bit earlier about burning lipless crankbaits. You want to go up to something that size, that's a 3/4 ounce. You could even go up to 1 ounce. Or if the bait fish in your lake are a lot bigger in size, you might want to not even consider throwing the smaller size baits, and that might be your jam. This might be the guy that you choose to throw all the time, something that size. And if I look at it, guys, it is a beautiful bait and it deserves to be thrown. So this Aruka shad is absolutely gorgeous. It's just the paint and the construction, everything. It looks like a little fish. Come on, guys, don't you want to throw that bait? So let's talk about the time of year. Every video that we're going to do, we're going to talk about time of year, and every video we're going to talk about places that have got ice and places that do not have ice. I have spoken to people that have caught bass through the ice, vertical jigging, lipless crankbaits, rattle traps, whatever you want to call them, where they cut a hole in the ice, they drop the bait straight down and they rip it up, like we spoke about the yo-yoing technique, and they just let it fall back down and rip it up and fall back down. And they have caught fish through the ice doing that, and I believe them, because it is just one of those baits. It gets a lot of attention. For places that do not have ice, I'm pretty sure that if you put enough effort in and you worked on your retrieve speeds and the areas that you threw them, you would be able to catch a fish on a lipless crankbait pretty much 12 months of the year. It is that good of a bait. And guys, I think it's worth putting in the effort to learn how to fish this little bait. A lot of guys will go out, tie it on, throw it once or twice. No, it doesn't work. But although it looks like such a simple bait, and we've spoken and we've said it is such a simple bait, there are subtle nuances in each and every. You can see how many different shapes there are and how many different sizes there are. There's reasons for that. They're all designed for specific things. So if you do a little bit of research and put the time in and work out why that specific bait, and that is something that I want you guys to go out and find out about, is that shape, is that shape, is that shape, is that shape. I'm pretty sure you're going to find something that suits you for the particular body of water that you fish. What about weather? Again, I don't think it's a major concern. I think that you can pretty much throw them in any weather. When do bait fish swim in a body of water? All year round. All kinds of weather. My personal experience, I have done better with lipless crankbaits when there's been a ripple on the surface. Just a gentle breeze blowing, particularly in bodies of water where it is very clear. So what about a body of water where the water is stained? Then I don't think it matters. I think you can just throw them 12 months of the year as long as there's no ice. Vary your retrieve speeds. Look on your graph if you're on a boat to see where the fish are in the water column and try and target them there. They are always good in shallow water. Always. If there are fish in shallow water, you can pretty much, and there's not too much heavy cover around, you've got a good chance of catching them on a lipless crankbait. The only time of year where it becomes tougher to catch a fish on a lipless crankbait is when the water gets colder. That doesn't mean that you can't catch them. We spoke about that yo-yoing technique earlier, where you pop it off the bottom, let it fall down, wind up the slack, pop it off the bottom, let it fall down, wind up on the slack. That technique is particularly effective in the wintertime. It's also particularly effective where you've got slightly deeper water, but in the wintertime, that yo-yoing technique is fantastic. What about in dirtier water? Well, it's got rattles. It makes a lot of noise. So maybe consider having one with more rattles than one with less rattles, more subtle rattles. If you fish in cleaner water, maybe something with more subtle rattles, maybe something with no rattles. You can get lipless crankbaits these days that do not have rattles in them. It's just the vibration of the bait that attracts the fish. But like every other lure that we're going to talk about with techniques, regardless of the type of the lure, if you are fishing dirtier water, adjust your colors accordingly. So go to a red bait, go to a brown bait, a brown craw color. Try a chartreuse with a black back. Try a bone-colored bait in the dirtier water. Just because the water is dirty does not mean you're not going to catch fish on it. And compared to most other baits that we're going to talk about in tackle and techniques, a lipless crankbait, if you get the right one, is going to be the loudest bait that you'll be able to, other than perhaps a Colorado blade spinnerbait. That's going to be the loudest bait you're ever going to throw when you're bass fishing. So what do I want to look for when I'm buying a lipless crankbait? What are the key things that I need to look for? It's a little bit tricky because most lipless crankbaits on the market these days are pretty good. So if you have a particular brand that you like, whether you like Spro, whether you like Boya, whether you like Rapala, whether you like the original rattle trap, Bulldoris rattle trap, whether you like Ema, to me, a good paint color is important, like we discussed. The blue and chrome guy, you can't really go wrong with that color. So the paint is important, but paint doesn't last. What needs to be of the best quality? Hooks, guys. Your hooks, and you've got to watch hooks on lipless crankbaits because of the way that they do tend to catch grass and catch structure and whatever the case is, maybe bang off a rock or whatever the case might be. Lipless crankbaits get banged up. These ones here that I showed you today are the ones that I have that are not smashed to pieces. Let me see if I can find one that is smashed to pieces, then you'll understand. I don't even have one in my box. I don't even have one in my box. I think they're all over in America. If you get the right lipless crankbait, they will eat the paint off it. And then they will carry on eating it even when it has no paint on it. I don't know what that is. I don't know if it has a specific sound. For me, the two most consistent lipless crankbaits as far as catching fish is concerned, and I have tried all of them. As you can see, I have many different brands. But the two most consistent lipless crankbaits that I have used, okay, let's make it 3. And the other one I don't even have here, but I'll put a picture up on the screen, is a Booyah One Knocker, which used to be the Excalibur, the Spro Aruka Shad, and the Strike King Red Eye Shad. That's not to say that these other baits won't catch fish. These are some of the OG. They don't look like it because they're still new. These are some of the OG lipless crankbaits. And these are what I used to throw, this and this, when I started throwing lipless crankbaits, a Rapado and a Bill Lewis. But as you go along and you try different baits, you'll find your favorites. They catch fish just as well now as they did 25, 30 years, 40 years ago, however long it is since Bill Lewis came out with that guy. But a good place to start would be a Spro Aruka Shad, a Strike King Red Eye Shad, or a Booyah. It doesn't have to be a One Knocker, just a Booyah lipless crankbait. Again, hooks probably the most important thing. And with hooks, guys, once you've caught a couple of big fish, and you will catch big fish on these baits, and your hooks start to bend, you can see on that one there, that one is starting to bend out, change them out. Don't leave it. I promise you what will happen is you'll hook a fish, the hook will either open or it'll snap off, and that'll be that, it's gone. Because the bite is so vicious with a lipless crankbait, it tends to hammer the hooks a lot harder, and also because you're banging into things with it all the time. And this is the case for all the hard baits that we'll talk about, this crankbaits, jerkbaits, topwaters. If a hook looks dodgy to you, change it out. Do not bend it back and say, I'll change it the next time. Keep a supply, not a lot, just a few treble hooks with you, either in your boat or in your backpack when you're walking the bank, of the size of baits that you require for the baits that you are using on that day. You just need a few. And if you start hammering a fish on a certain type of bait and the hook gets damaged, change it out. That's the top tip, guys. Change it out. Guys, again, this has been a longer video, and I appreciate your patience. As I said when we started the tackle and techniques, these videos would be longer. It takes longer to explain things clearly. There's a lot to get through, a lot of different things that you need to understand if you feel that this is a technique that could benefit you on your own water. I appreciate all the comments. It's fantastic. It makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.